大家好，歡迎大家收睇第二節嘅週一長睇呢個節目。我哋今日同大家講嘅咧就係最近喺溫哥華發生嘅漏油事件。咁而呢個海上漏油事件究竟對於我哋嘅環境或者係溫哥華未來嘅經濟有啲咩影響咧？甚至乎喺呢度居住嘅人會唔會有面對更加多嘅呢啲潛在嘅危險或者嘅事情咧？咁我哋今日好高興咧請嚟咗溫哥華嘅副市長 Andrea Reimer 同我哋深入討論呢個話題嘅。Andrea, welcome again.
Hi, Gabriel.
Hi. Well, we all know that the city of Vancouver, I guess, including yourself, take a very strong stand against the expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline. Can you tell us why is that?
Yeah, well, we looked at the proposal when it first came out. We've met with Kinder Morgan on at least 2 occasions now to better understand it. Our evaluation of it is that it brings a lot of risk to the city of Vancouver. They have an existing pipeline that comes through, empties out at Burnaby and tankers load there and go through. There's about 5 a month right now that go through Vancouver's harbors. This would increase that to 34 tankers a month, so that 6 to 7-fold increase in risk because every new ship.
So it's more than 1 per day, each day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a substantial increase from roughly 1 a week right now that's coming through. So lots and lots of risk. Our economy depends on both our brand. We have a brand as this beautiful, clean, green city, but we also have a multi-billion-dollar tourism economy in the region, and certainly Vancouver is a big beneficiary of that. So as we saw just this last month, an oil spill has a big impact on our tourism industry, even a small spill. So when we looked at all of this with Kinder Morgan and said, okay, so those are the risks, what are the benefits? Essentially, there are no benefits. This, what they would be transporting is intended for export. It's not oil that's needed by people in the Lower Mainland or even in the larger region. So they were asking us as a city to absorb a massive amount of financial risk, health risk, environmental risk, with no gain whatsoever. And for us, that just didn't seem like a reasonable deal for our residents.
No, but from the federal Canada point of view, from the Alberta provincial government point of view, they would think that, well, this is very important for Canadian economy to have these valuable resources being sold or shipped out to other countries.
Well, more than half of it's actually not oil, it's a kind of crude oil called diluted bitumen that comes from the tar sands in Alberta. When it's extracted, it's kind of about the consistency of thick, chunky peanut butter. They put a bunch of chemicals in it to make it liquid so it can travel through a pipeline. It gets to Burnaby. About half of it is actually used by the region. Another half is already being exported. So from our perspective, we're already absorbing a lot of risk as a city on behalf of Canada to have this diluted bitumen and crude oil shipped through our waters. And we feel like that's a reasonable level of risk that we're already taking. So the idea that a 7-fold increase should be something that we do in the interests of tar sands in Alberta, we would need a much more stronger case put to us. And even at that, I think it's a very difficult time to be contemplating increasing infrastructure for fossil fuels when most of the world, China, certainly the United States, Europe, are all talking about how we decrease our dependence on fossil fuels. So there's an excellent opportunity here for Canada to become a renewable energy superpower that carries very little risk, way more jobs. We'd love to have that discussion with the federal government, but so far haven't found a pathway to engage that
I guess
discussion.
I'm more practical in this sense. I actually, well, especially from people in Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, we want to know, say, especially there is a recent oil spill of the fuel, the ship fuel, and then how do you compare these kind of fuel to, you just mentioned bitumen?
So the bunker fuel that spilled isn't as it's toxic, but not as toxic as the diluted bitumen. And consider that the fuel that spilled, we think it's around 3,000 liters. These tankers that they're looking at bringing into Vancouver, they have 80 million liters of oil in them of this diluted bitumen. So even a small spill of 80 million, like if a small amount of it spilled, the oil spill we just had would sort of look like putting an eyedropper into a bathtub, like relative amounts different. A huge, massive impact. So the kind of images that we saw from the spill in April, they would look tiny compared to the kind of images that would be coming out, and the kind of confusion. I mean, it was not a very coordinated response that we saw to the April spill. Imagine 6,000 times the amount to clean up. With that level of response, we have no confidence that the federal government has the ability to be able to respond to a big tanker spill.
I actually read some article about these kind of bitumen, especially some of those leak incidents in the United States. Well, those images being portrayed is very horrible, because they claim that the bitumen is so poisonous that even though it's in the water, but even coastal residents have to be evacuated, those kind of things. Is that true?
Yeah, well, you know, the challenge with bitumen is we don't even really know what's in it. Legally, the companies don't have to tell us. We know that tar sands form the base of bitumen, so this thick, chunky, peanut butter-like stuff. It's tar. They're called tar sands because it's really tar that they're shipping. We know that then chemicals are put in. We're not told what chemicals, because it's considered a company secret, because the more liquid you can make it, the faster it moves, and the more money you can make as a company. So when we've asked Kinder Morgan for this kind of information to be able to do adequate spill response modeling, are they ready? We haven't been able to get it. We do know from spills in the United States, as you told us, as you were mentioning, there was a big one in Michigan in the Kalamazoo River, devastating to local fisheries, to the local residents, to the fishing industry, to tourism in the area. What happens when it hits water-diluted bitumen is that the peanut butter stuff sinks, and you get almost like a patina, like a coating over the bottom of whatever is in the water area.
And then you kill all the mechanism there.
Whatever's down there is just going to get smothered, essentially. And then all the chemicals evaporate out into the air. So if you're a human, you know, a resident living in the area, that's suddenly going to be part of the air that you're breathing. And because it takes some time to get chemical information out of the companies when a spill happens, it could be a period of time before we were adequately able to protect residents.
Okay. So, well, you just mentioned about how poisonous, or the potential poisons of it. But at the same time, in terms of cleanup, is there any way to clean up? Because, well, I was told that, well, like the Michigan Lake example that you mentioned, it was never being cleaned up.
No, it's still, to my understanding, they still haven't cleaned it up to the level they'd like to. A more conventional kind of oil, the Exxon Valdez, which was a tanker that crashed on the coast of Alaska in 1989, so that was over 25 years ago now. They're still finding oil from that disaster. There's $3.5 billion in direct costs and impacts as a result of that. So when you're talking about an oil tanker disaster, you're not measuring it in weeks or even months. You're measuring it in years and decades, and in the billions of dollars of impact. And in a city like Vancouver, where our entire economy, our brand as a city, our ability to attract people here and to keep them here, all depends on this image, which is inconsistent with a giant oil spill. Those kinds of numbers would likely get a lot higher.
Well, you just mentioned, say 25 years ago, the amount, it's 5 billion something?
Yes.
But say if it happens now in Vancouver, one estimation, it's actually $40 billion. So how much is $40 billion? $40 billion is pretty much a little bit less than the BC government expenditure for the entire year.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you are talking about this kind of amount, very likely, well, it will be the taxpayers who is paying for that, because, well, those shipping company, well, first of all, it's not the responsibility of the pipeline company, because they already finished the job. They only go through the pipeline. But when this is the oil tanker, then that's the shipping company. And most of those shipping company actually are foreign registered, and they don't have that much kind of capacity to repay for cleanup.
very hard to track. I mean, oftentimes this ship was built in Korea, it's registered in Cyprus, it might be owned somewhere else. Shipping is an international business and very challenging to track down a responsible party and to hold them legally liable. There's a small fund of about 125 million that's there, but the numbers we're talking about are much, much larger than that. So this is why when we're looking at the risk of a 7-fold increase in oil tanker traffic versus the benefits, we see way more risk than is reasonable to ask our residents to be able to shoulder with very little benefit on the table for Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned about risk because when we talk about this, because this is a huge economic interest to a province and to the entire Canada. So people are saying that, okay, well, we live in a world that has risks everywhere. Say we saw accidents, but still people fly and people drive. So, well, we live in a risky world. So how do you respond to this kind of comment?
I totally agree. I mean, there's the issue of driving, for example. Driving carries a certain amount of risk. Just traveling, getting out of my house and getting to the bus stop every morning carries a certain amount of risk, but you weigh those risks off against what are the benefits. So I need to work, so obviously that's a benefit of me leaving the house every day. But I also enjoy working, so there's a social benefit as well, right? I play soccer, so that carries a risk. Broke my foot last year, but the benefits of it are far outweigh the risks for me. And I think as governments, when we're looking at activities, we certainly have to look at the benefits. So in the case of the tar sands, they've made the federal government would certainly benefit from increasing oil and gas revenue. Then you look at the risks. We're talking about some very large numbers, some very long time frames that it could be impactful. We don't see the benefit there for when you take the benefit, subtract the risk, it's a negative number. Certainly for Vancouver, we would argue that it's actually a negative number for Canada. That we have an opportunity right now on the global stage to be selling very high quality renewable energy. There's certainly a request from the global community for more and more of that kind of a supply and less fossil fuel supply. So we think there's an opportunity here to have a fantastic national discussion about how we increase jobs, how we increase benefits across the country for people from energy production, and how we meet. I mean, Canada's a really strong energy producer. We have, in addition to the tar sands, we have a lot of wind, we have a lot of solar, a lot of tidal, a lot of water sources that could be producing and more that could be producing hydro. We could really be we could be the energy superpower of the 21st century. So rather than argue over something that we see sort of as a past discussion where clearly the risks now are very much outweighing the benefits, let's have a discussion about a much lower risk energy infrastructure that brings a lot more benefits across the country.
Yeah, thanks for spending your time with us today. 好啦，我哋今日節目嘅時間就到呢度啦。咁好明顯啦，即係頭先Andrew 都講過啦，即係如果真係出咗事嘅話咧，咁就唔單止係即係呢個財物上或者我哋旅遊業嘅影響或者損失，甚至乎大家知道啦，我哋BC 省咧亦都有好豐富嘅海產係出產嘅。如果真係有任何大型嘅漏油事件咧，好似頭先講緊話嗰啲咁樣嘅大嘅即係運油嘅船，如果出咗事嘅話咧，嗰個影響咧係絕對係唔少嘢嘅。甚至乎好似今次呢個漏油事件，亦都睇到另一個事情咧，就係話，就算我哋肯咧，美國都會上嚟同我哋即係計數，會即係有啲法律嘅訴訟要我哋賠償嘅。好啦，今日嘅節目時間就到呢度啦。咁下個禮拜咧就有另一個話題同大家再討論嘅。拜拜。